The calm before injustice. This isn't just another story of mistaken identity. It's not a headline designed to fade in 24 hours. It's a story rooted in reality, where assumption trumps protocol, and a decorated legacy is almost erased by a single act of prejudice. It begins not in chaos, but in calm, a quiet spring morning, a routine stop after a day of high-level intelligence briefings. No security detail, no fanfare. Just a woman, a soldier, and a leader stepping out of her SUV near a bookstore. What happened next wasn't just about who she was, but about who the world refused to see her as. The handcuffs, the silence, the humiliation, these were not just mistakes. They were consequences of a system built to overlook the very people who have built and defended it. And in the same breath that this story opens, with a quiet walk across a city sidewalk, so too does its impact begin, because when the steel closed around her wrists, they didn't just arrest a black woman. They handcuffed the United States Army's high, a striking black female general, and the world was about to learn her name. A routine day turns into a night. Mayor General Alexandria Braxton didn't need the stars on her shoulders to command respect. Her reputation did that long before her uniform. On that cool spring morning, she had no reason to expect trouble. Her morning had been filled with strategic briefings and high-level meetings at the Pentagon. She was dressed casually now, blending in like any other civilian. But as she stepped out of her government-tissued SUV after a short stop at a bookstore, she noticed two patrol officers eyeing her from across the street. She'd been trained to observe, to read the room. And something in their posture told her this wasn't a friendly glance. They crossed the road with intent, suspicion gleaming in their eyes. She stood tall, unafraid. "Ma'am, step away from the vehicle." One barked. No greeting, no explanation, just commands. That's when she realized this was no misunderstanding. It was the beginning of a humiliating ordeal. Disrespect in uniform, General Braxton calmly reached into her coat to retrieve her military ID, but before she could even get her fingers around it, one officer moved, quick, aggressive, hands where I can see 'em. He shouted, grabbing her wrist. "I'm General Braxton, United States Army. If you'll let me—" But again they cut her off. The other officer twisted her arms behind her back and forced on cold metal cuffs. Pedestrians glanced, startled. No one knew who she was, and that was the danger. These men didn't see a respected leader. They saw a threat because of her skin, not her service. The tightness of the handcuffs wasn't just physical. It was symbolic. Years of honor, decades of service, reduced to a sidewalk scene of shame. Yet even then her voice didn't rise. "You're making a mistake," she said softly, but with the kind of command that could silence a war room. They didn't listen, and that silence would cost them everything. Calm before the storm, despite the cold metal biting into her wrists and the humiliation sinking in with each stare from bystanders, General Braxton remained composed. Her training had conditioned her to remain calm in hostile territory, and right now that's exactly what this felt like. She sat silently in the back of the squad car, eyes forward, her breathing steady. Panic was a luxury she couldn't afford. Rage would have validated every false narrative they already believed about her. Instead, she waited, calculating, watching. She knew the system better than most, and the moment the officers failed to check her ID, she understood the scale of their blunder. They thought she was just another civilian they could toss around, but they were cuffing not only a general, they were cuffing a storm, and when that storm called the Pentagon, it wouldn't rain, it would flood careers. She didn't need to fight, she needed to wait, and then strike with precision. The badge and the blindness, the officers didn't even pause long enough to consider her words. They were too busy playing hero, imagining themselves cracking down on some imaginary threat. To them, General Braxton was nothing more than a suspicious black woman behind the wheel of a government SUV. They never asked why she had military tags, never checked the credentials sewn inside her coat. Bias had already written their script. One officer radioed in a vague report, labeling her as non-compliant, while the other kept a hand near his taser, just in case. It wasn't just a lapse in protocol, it was a deliberate dismissal of humanity. And worse, they didn't realize who they were dealing with. This wasn't just a woman. This was a Pentagon insider, a war-tested strategist who had coordinated rescue ops halfway around the world. Yet here she was, treated like a threat in her own nation. Their blindness wasn't just dangerous. It was about to become very, very costly. Realization at the station, the moment General Braxton's name was uttered at the front desk, everything changed. The desk sergeant, a 20-year veteran of the force, nearly dropped his coffee as the name hit his ears. "What did you say her name was?" he asked, eyes wide. The arresting officer repeated it, smugly unaware. "Braxton, Alexandria Braxton, time stop." The sergeant fumbled with the computer, typed in the name, and what popped up wasn't a rap sheet. It was a profile marked with clearance levels above his pay grade. His heart sank. "You cuffed General Alexandria Braxton." He whispered, as if saying it out loud might summon consequences faster. He knew the Pentagon wouldn't just ask questions, they'd demand answers, and suddenly the proud little collar, pin-wearing patrolman outside didn't look so confident. A thundercloud was forming over the precinct, and they had no umbrella. The damage was already done, and now the reckoning was inevitable. The call that broke the silence within minutes, a secure line to the Pentagon lit up on the sergeant's desk like a warning flare. It wasn't a call, it was an alarm. On the other end, a colonel with a voice as cold as iron and just as sharp spoke only 5 words. "Put her on the phone." Moments later, General Braxton, finally unshackled but still furious in silence, took the receiver. Her tone was calm, clipped, and loaded with precision. She relayed the entire incident without flinching. No exaggeration, no emotion, just facts. That's all it took. Within 30 minutes, a Pentagon response team was activated. Security footage from the arrest site was demanded. Internal Affairs launched an immediate inquiry. Word began to spread like wildfire through command channels. A Black 4-star general had been wrongfully arrested by local police on U.S. soil. This wasn't just about one woman anymore. This was about the face of America's military being violated, and careers were now dangling by threads. When the military moves, the officers had no idea how fast the gears of the military could turn when one of their own was targeted unjustly. By the time General Braxton was escorted from the holding room, a black SUV with military plates had already pulled up outside the precinct. A decorated colonel stepped out, flanked by Pentagon security officers. His stride was slow but lethal, every step echoing the authority of Washington's war rooms. He didn't yell, he didn't need to. "General Braxton will be leaving with us now," he stated. The station fell into stunned silence. Internal Affairs officers arrived minutes later, silently collecting bodycam footage, arrest logs, and witness statements. The once confident patrolmen were now shrinking in their seats. They had overstepped badly. The military wasn't just responding, it was retaliating through legal, political, and procedural firepower. And for the first time, the officers began to understand they hadn't just arrested a woman. They had ignited a system built to crush failure. Public apology, private fallout the next morning, while news outlets quietly received a redacted memo marked confidential. The police department's PR office was in crisis mode. Under Pentagon pressure, the department issued a formal apology, cold, calculated, and vetted by 6 attorneys. "We regret the wrongful detainment of General Alexandria Braxton and are cooperating fully with federal oversight." But behind the scenes, things were far less polite. Both officers involved were suspended without pay pending a full investigation. Their union scrambled for support, but no one wanted to touch the fallout. The mayor's office distanced itself. The police chief was called to Washington for a closed-door disciplinary review. Rumors swirled. The officers had ignored multiple internal warnings, and one had passed citations for racial profiling. This wasn't just a one-time error, it was systemic rot. And now, under Braxton's silent watch, the walls were coming down. They didn't just embarrass a general, they exposed the fractures in their own foundation. A nation takes notice what began as a quiet act of discrimination on a street corner in Arlington erupted into a national conversation. Whispers turned into headlines, though official footage remained classified. Insider leaks reached independent journalists. The name General Alexandria Braxton surged across social media. #salute her name trended globally. Civil rights groups demanded answers. Military veterans publicly rallied behind her, reminding the world that her name was carved into decades of national service. Congressional leaders called for immediate hearings on racial bias within law enforcement, especially in how they interact with high-ranking officials and veterans of color. Even the president made a veiled reference during a national address, praising those who uphold honor even when dishonored. The ripple effect couldn't be stopped. What was once an attempted show of force by two officers had become a mirror held to America's face, one it could no longer ignore, and General Braxton, quiet and steady, had become a lightning rod for justice. Stars, strength, and the final word weeks later, General Braxton stood before a room full of cameras, medals gleaming beneath the stage lights. She was being awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom not for her battlefield service, but for something harder, grace under injustice. Her speech was brief, delivered without rage, but every word was sharpened like a blade. "Power is not in how loudly you speak," she said, "but in how calm you stay when the world tries to silence you." The room fell still. She continued, "What happened to me was not new, but what came after must be." Her voice wasn't trembling, it was thunder wrapped in silk. She didn't call for vengeance, only for accountability, and in that moment her presence eclipsed every uniform in the room. A wrong had been done, but it became a reckoning, and General Braxton, she didn't just reclaim her dignity, she changed the rules of the battlefield. From silence to salute, what started as a blatant abuse of power evolved into something no one expected. A movement, a reckoning, a mirror held up to the nation's conscience. General Alexandria Braxton could have stayed silent. She could have let the Pentagon handle it behind the scenes, but instead she chose a different path, the path of transformation through truth. She didn't demand revenge, she demanded reform. Those who tried to strip her of dignity were stripped of their badges, their promotions, their illusions of power. In their wake, they left behind a system that would never again treat rank and race as opposites. She didn't just protect the integrity of her name, she preserved the integrity of the uniform itself. And so, like the morning it all began, this story returns to quiet, no protest chants, no sirens, just a powerful woman walking forward uncuffed, unbroken, and unmistakably seen. Because what they thought was a weak target was a force that would change everything, and the next time they see a black woman in plain clothes, they'll remember, she might just outrank everyone in the room,